The holidays are supposed to be a time for joy, right? You pack up the family, load the car with gifts, and set off to spend a few days with loved ones. That's what we were doing. Benjamin had insisted we leave late to avoid the traffic, and while I'd argued against it, I finally gave in. Looking back, I wish I'd fought harder. It was around 9 p.m., and we were somewhere along Route 37, a long, winding highway that cuts through dense woods and stretches of emptiness. The snow had started to fall heavier than the forecast predicted. Olivia, our 10-year-old, was snuggled in the backseat with her headphones on, humming along to her music. Benjamin was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as the tires crunched through the accumulating snow. "Shouldn't we stop somewhere?" I asked, staring out the window at the vast, dark nothingness. "This doesn't feel safe." "There's nowhere to stop," Benjamin replied, his voice tight. "The next town's at least 30 miles away." Just as he said that, the dashboard lights dimmed for a split second. Then the car sputtered. I glanced at Benjamin, hoping it was nothing, but the engine gave a loud groan and died. The car slowed to a halt, right there in the middle of the highway. "Great," Benjamin muttered, slamming his palms on the steering wheel. "Just great." "What happened?" Olivia asked, pulling off her headphones. "The car broke down," I said, trying to sound calm. "Don't worry, sweetie. Daddy's got it under control." But he didn't. Benjamin got out, popped the hood, and tinkered with the engine while I tried calling for help. No signal. Not even a single bar. I climbed out of the car and looked around. The snowstorm was getting worse, and the icy wind cut through my coat. The cold made my hands shake as I held the phone up, desperate for even the faintest connection. Nothing. "We're stuck," Benjamin said bluntly, slamming the hood shut. "Battery's dead, and there's no signal out here." Panic bubbled in my chest, but I pushed it down. "What do we do? We can't just sit here." "We wait," he said. "Someone will come by." That was the thing, though. No one had driven past us for over an hour, and with the snow piling up, the road was practically invisible. We got back inside the car and tried to stay warm. Olivia curled up in the backseat, using her coat as a blanket. Benjamin and I huddled in the front, trying to keep our breaths steady. It must have been 2 hours before we saw the headlights. Olivia was the first to notice, sitting up and pointing out the back window. "Mom, Dad, look!" Relief flooded me. Finally, I whispered, "Benjamin, flash the lights or something. Get their attention." He did, clicking the headlights on and off. The oncoming vehicle slowed, its beams cutting through the swirling snow. But then something changed. Instead of pulling over to help, the car stopped about 50 feet behind us, its engine idling. "Why aren't they coming closer?" I asked, my voice shaky. Benjamin didn't answer. He kept staring at the rearview mirror, his jaw tightening. "I don't know." The vehicle's headlights flicked off, plunging us back into darkness. Then they turned back on, this time accompanied by a blaring horn that made Olivia jump. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. Benjamin reached for the door handle. "Stay here," he said, his tone firm. "What are you doing?" I grabbed his arm. "You can't go out there." "I need to find out what they want," he replied. Before I could stop him, he stepped out into the snow. I watched as he walked toward the mysterious car, his silhouette illuminated by its headlights. But before he could get too close, the vehicle revved its engine and lurched forward, stopping just inches from Benjamin. He stumbled back, slipping on the icy road. "Get back in the car," I screamed, my breath fogging up the window. Benjamin scrambled to his feet and ran back. The moment he shut the door, the other car's headlights turned off again. We sat there, hearts pounding, staring into the pitch black. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. "Maybe they're gone?" Olivia whispered. Benjamin shook his head. "I don't think so." He was right. A second later, the vehicle's lights snapped back on, and it began creeping forward. Slowly, menacingly, Benjamin threw the car into neutral and tried to push it to the side of the road, but the snow was too thick. "What do they want?" I whispered, clutching Olivia tightly. "I don't know," Benjamin said. "But we're not staying to find out." He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and opened the door. "Follow me," he said. "We're going to walk." "Are you crazy?" I hissed. "We'll freeze out there." "If we stay, we're sitting ducks," he shot back. Reluctantly, I bundled Olivia up as much as I could, and we stepped out into the storm. The snow was knee-deep, and the wind howled around us. Behind us, the mysterious vehicle's headlights stayed trained on our car, its engine idling. We trudged through the snow, heading toward what we hoped was a gas station we'd passed earlier. My legs burned and Olivia started to cry, but we kept moving. The vehicle didn't follow us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Eventually, we saw lights in the distance. A truck was coming our way. I waved my arms frantically, screaming for help. The driver stopped, a kind older man who pulled us into his warm cab and radioed for assistance. When we told him about the car that had harassed us, his face went pale. "This stretch of roads had trouble before," he said. "You're lucky they didn't follow you." To this day, I don't know who was in that car or what they wanted. But every time I see headlights on a dark highway, my stomach knots up, and I'm right back on that freezing road, wondering if we'd make it out alive. Experience true horror like never before. Join me on my new horror channel, where I bring spine-chilling true stories to life with my voice. If you enjoy the thrill, subscribe and show your support. The link to my channel is on the screen or in the description. Don't miss out.
I never really believed those survival stories you hear about on TV. You know, the ones where people get stuck in some impossible situation.
It's funny how life has a way of putting you in situations you'd never imagine. I've always been the kind of person who likes control, you know? Planning routes, double-checking weather reports, that's me. But that night, none of it mattered. It was just me, my old Subaru, and a storm that felt like it wanted to swallow the world whole. I was on my way to deliver some supplies to a little mountain town called Ridgepoint. It's tucked so deep into the Rockies you wouldn't know it was there, unless you were looking for it. The storm wasn't supposed to hit until the next morning, or at least that's what the forecast said. But as I climbed higher into the mountains, the snow started falling slow at first, then like someone had ripped open a bag of powdered sugar and just kept dumping. The GPS was my first problem. The signal got spotty, then it just quit. The screen froze on some pixelated map that didn't mean a thing, and when I tried to restart it, it gave up completely. No big deal, I thought. I'd driven this road before. Except now, everything was white: the road, the trees, even the sky. The storm blurred everything together, and the road signs, if there were any, were buried under at least a foot of snow. My palms were sweating on the steering wheel, even though the heater barely kept the car warm. I kept telling myself to calm down. "It's just snow," I muttered. "People drive in snow all the time." But the car started to slide, the tires losing traction on the ice. I slowed down to a crawl, afraid to press the brakes too hard. Every bump in the road felt like a warning. When the car fishtailed again, I pulled over. Well, I think I pulled over. Honestly, I couldn't tell where the road ended and the ditch began. I sat there for a while, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't just sit there and freeze, but driving blind didn't feel much better. That's when I saw a faint flashing light up ahead, cutting through the storm. At first, I thought it was another car, but as it got closer, I realized it was a snowplow. The big kind, with those rotating amber lights on top. Relief washed over me so fast I almost cried. A snowplow meant the road was being cleared. It meant someone else was out here too. I waited until it passed, then pulled back onto the road to follow it. The plow's taillights were like a beacon, guiding me through the storm. I stayed a safe distance behind, grateful for the tracks it carved into the snow. But as we went on, something felt off. The plow wasn't sticking to the main road. I knew the route to Ridgepoint, and this wasn't it. At first, I told myself they might know a shortcut or a better way through the storm. But the farther we went, the narrower the road became. The trees closed in on both sides, their branches heavy with snow. I thought about stopping. Something in my gut told me to stop. But then the thought of being alone out there, with no idea where I was, scared me more than following the plow. So I kept going. The snow seemed to fall harder, the wind howling like it was trying to push me back. The plow's lights flickered in and out of the storm, and I had to strain to keep them in sight. I realized I hadn't seen any other cars for hours. No cabins, no signs, nothing but snow and trees. Then, just like that, the plow was gone. 1 second it was there, and the next, it vanished. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering in my chest. The road stretched ahead, covered in untouched snow. No tracks, no sign a plow had ever been there. I got out of the car, the cold biting through my coat as I looked around. The wind was deafening, the snow stinging my face. I yelled into the storm, but my voice was swallowed up instantly. Panic set in fast. My brain scrambled for an explanation. Maybe I'd lost sight of the plow when I stopped. Maybe it had turned off somewhere and I hadn't noticed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. I could feel it in my chest, this heavy, gnawing fear I couldn't shake. I got back in the car and tried to turn around, but the road was too narrow. The tires spun uselessly in the snow. I was stuck. I checked my phone, no service. Of course. That's when I saw it. A faint light in the distance, off to the side of the road. It wasn't the plow. This was different, softer, like the glow of a lantern. I didn't want to leave the car, but what choice did I have? I grabbed my coat and flashlight and started walking. The snow was deep, almost up to my knees, and every step was a struggle. The light didn't seem to get any closer, no matter how far I walked. My flashlight barely cut through the storm, but I kept moving, driven by desperation more than anything else. Eventually, I stumbled upon a small cabin. The light was coming from a window, flickering like it came from a fire. I practically fell against the door, pounding on it with everything I had. My voice cracked as I yelled for help. The door opened, and an old man stood there, his face lined and weathered. He pulled me inside without a word, shutting the door against the storm. The warmth hit me like a wall, and I collapsed onto a chair near the fire. "You followed the plow, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low and grave. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. He shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Then he looked at me, his eyes sharp despite his age. "That plow's been seen before. Always in storms like this. People who follow it, most of them don't come back." My heart felt like it stopped. "What do you mean?" I managed to whisper. "It's not real," he said. "Or maybe it is, but not in the way you think. It leads people off the road, into the woods." And then he trailed off, staring into the fire. I didn't sleep that night. The storm raged on, but all I could think about was the plow's lights and how close I'd come to following it to wherever it wanted me to go. The next morning, when the storm finally broke, the old man helped me dig out my car. I thanked him, but he just nodded, his face grim. As I drove back down the mountain, the sun shining on the fresh snow, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, something that wasn't quite done.